Folks, and welcome to F1 TV Tech Talk for the fourth and final day of the final week of pre-season testing.
4 days.
I know. Sam Collins, Will Buxton with you for about the next 30-ish minutes to dissect everything that we've learnt or not learnt from the last 7.5, nearly 8 days. It's all the time the teams have got. Sam, here we stand now. I think that the image is starting to become clear of what we can expect in Barcelona. Another morning in which we've seen a dominant display from Ferrari.
It is. Those red things with their matte paintwork are very, very lightweight matte paintworks. Slightly lighter, save a few grams, make the car go even faster, which will upset the teams even more. Very fast Ferraris, nearly as far, well, faster than the lap record here now, with the ultimate lap time of 1:16.0.
See, this is it. Let's not confuse the folks at home. The fastest lap time that we saw on the books today, Vettel, 16.221. Incredibly, Leclerc yesterday a 16.231. So little to choose between them, both on the C5 tyre, both the same kind of time of day as they've been doing for the last 8 days. Very similar run plans day to day to day.
Now, if you glue together all of the different sectors, the three sectors on the track, and get everybody's best sector, you actually work out a lap time that's 2 tenths quicker.
That's what you're saying, the 16.0.
The 16.0, which is incredibly fast.
Absolutely.
But of course, it's really important to point out, those lap times were set on the C5 tyre, the super soft, the ultra soft, the softest tyre that Pirelli have bought here. The softest tyre Pirelli had in 2018 wasn't available at the race, so we can't really do a direct comparison on those times.
What can we do a comparison with, Sam?
Not a lot, frankly.
What about last year's testing?
Last year's testing was wet and cold and snowy in one day, so again, doesn't really apply. And of course, those tyres were the different tyres as well.
What we can do a small comparison on, though, Bottas, 16.5, third fastest time of the test so far. He's second going into lunch on the final day. Is that the green shoots of hope that Mercedes would be wanting to see going into the first race?
Still half a second slower than that ultimate fastest time. So, and that's a country mile or kilometre if you're that way inclined.
And the other worrying thing for Mercedes, and I think for everybody, will be that Sebastian Vettel earlier in the day did a 16.7 on the C3 tyre. So just a couple of tenths off Bottas' best time, the best time that Mercedes has set. In fact, the best time that anyone's set, other than a Ferrari. Seb's 2 tenths off it on the C3, not even going for it on a soft tyre.
And the C3 being the middle tyre of all of them is the one you're going to see most of this season, I suspect. So that's the tyre to look at, and Ferrari are very, very fast on it.
Now, looking back over the last few days, we obviously touched on Sebastian having his crash on day 2. That footage is now available online, and I think we could see just exactly what happened there with the rim front left.
Yeah, I mean, it was a case of crash, bang, wallop. What a test day over the last 2 days. And when you look at that brilliant footage, it clearly is a left front failure. I'm still sceptical it was caused by FOD for an object. You can see on the track beforehand that the track's clear. He's on the racing line. It looks like a quick lap, and it just fails. Ferrari have been trying out a new type of wheel rim, so the actual metal bit of the wheel. And I'm just wondering, was there a manufacturing defect in that wheel? Ferrari won't want to say that, because if it turns out that those wheels they're using maybe aren't up to scratch, and it's not certain, there's no certainty this is the case.
No.
This is a pure hypothetical guesswork here, that the wheel could fail and the FIA would ban those wheels instantly. So they want to avoid that. But we don't know. It could have been for an object earlier in the lap, but the failure was spectacular. Very, very unusual.
And very, very sudden. Also, a crash yesterday that has actually really affected Red Bull Racing. Pierre Gasly has bookended his first 8 days with Red Bull Racing. He shunted early on in the first week. He shunted late on yesterday, losing it, just putting a wheel off on the grass on the run-up from 8 into 9 and having a really heavy shunt. If there's one place on this track you don't want to lose it, it's turn 9.
Again, there's brilliant footage of that on the F1 website, and it is a big shunt he had. There was a lot of speculation that he'd actually flipped the car. He didn't. We see that in the footage, but he wrote off the box, did the whole rear end of the car. Left front was destroyed as well. The Red Bull mechanics and engineers walked out the back of the garage and were like, let's go and have a coffee. We've got a long night tonight. And I saw the energy drinks being rolled into the back of the garage. There was some speculation the damage was so significant Red Bull were going to pack up and go home. That's not the case, but they are flying in new parts from Milton Keynes today, and I think the London flights should be arriving should have arrived about an hour ago, so those guys should be arriving at the track about the time we're filming this, and the guys should be bolting it all onto the back of the car behind us.
Well, thank heavens it's the 1st of March and not the 1st of April, or that may have proven a touch more complicated getting those out here. That said, they have had to rebuild the car. A lot of old parts on that car. Verstappen only 8th fastest this morning on a 17.7 with what is ostensibly still a bit of a Franken car. Now, we talked about Valtteri Bottas earlier, of course, and the big talking point of this test so far, Mercedes, what are they up to? Frankly, we don't know. One man who we hope does is Mr. James Allison.
Hello, James.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, right, thank you.
Good. How's your 8 days been?
It's been tiring, it always is, because they're long days and they come thick and fast, and they also come off the back of having done a lot of work back in the factory as well. So, been tiring. It's been a sort of gradual building of confidence as the 8 days have unfolded, and not too bad.
Now, we've been told by the team that the car you ran in week 1 was finished in November, and the car you've been running this week has been sort of utilising every spare second up to as close as possible to the start of this week to get all of those upgraded development parts on that car. Is that the reality of the situation, that you had that car that you ran in week 1 finished, ready to go that early?
No, not finished and ready to go, but substantially complete. But no, the composite bits and the bodywork bits weren't ready to go. All the stuff that you use to prove off the internal parts of the car, the functioning core of the car, they were ready to go. And the concept behind a sort of launch car and then a race 1 car, there's 2 bits to it really. The sooner you can stick a fork in the thing and say, all these internal bits are going to go here, and here, then the more brave you can be about the definition dates for the thing that you want to go racing. So just making some decisions about bodywork for a launch car quite early allows all the people that do the internal packaging to fix all that stuff, and then it means we can be way braver with the release dates of our race 1 car, meaning we take as much of the goodness of the wind tunnel into the first race.
Some of your rivals, and they do like a rumour and a story, believe you might have 2 different design philosophies that you're following. Do you have the capability to think about doing something like that, to have 2 totally different cars that you consider developing throughout the season, track dependent?
No, well, everyone loves a nice conspiracy theory. I wish we were that smart, but no. This is you're just seeing where we were a few months ago, where we are a few weeks ago, and
where will we be?
And it will keep developing from there. It's very difficult to maintain 2 strands because there's a huge opportunity cost for every experiment you do, and if one of your strands is not as good in the end, you've just wasted a load of time, effort and money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, we look at your car, the W10, it's quite different conceptually to pretty much everything else in the pit lane. You're very long, you've not gone for this low side impact structure, you didn't do last year, but everybody else in the field has done that now. Do you feel confident? Well, I'm sure you do, but your direction is so different to everybody else, and there's a lot of teams of clever engineers with nice wind tunnels and nice CFD. Are you super confident you've gone the right way?
I don't think you're ever super confident. I don't think we were super confident at any point last year. We did sneak a championship out of it, but it doesn't mean you're confident, and I think you never are. You could have had this conversation with me last year. We were pretty much out on our own last year as well. Yeah. And time will tell whether we're swift enough. I mean, I'm sure you're going to ask me in a minute where I think we stand, and I'd say, we got a little bit to find to chase the Ferrari down, who look a bit quicker than us at the moment.
It's not the first time you found yourselves in that position, though, and over the certainly last year, you were able to outdevelop, outthink, outmaneuver Ferrari in the championship stakes. You're going for a 6th World Championship. Is there an inherent tiredness that comes from having to fight consistently for titles to overcome the deficit that you did last year? Or is the team as kind of sprightly and fighting fit?
Well, I think it's the beginning of a new year. It's a massively exciting time. A Formula 1 team exists only for the purpose of doing this. And the fight is, of course, a fight we've been having with our main rivals last year, the year before that. they too are in this fight. They too are invigorated and excited about the chance to do it all again. So the fact that it's our brilliant opportunity, should we be able to take it, to turn it into another championship, well, that's just a sort of a bonus of boost of motivation for us. But the main thing is just we're back at the start with a clean slate, all the challenges of 21 races ahead of us, and all the fun and fight and excitement of that ahead of us.
Excellent. You mentioned fun and fight. Obviously, when you see all of these cars roll out for the first time and all the new bits and shiny things up and down the pit lane here at Barcelona, you must pick out a few bits and bobs. Oh, I wish we thought of that. Or are there things that we thought of all of this and we've gone our way and think it's nicer?
No, crikey, no. It's always the same. You can't wait to see how your thing goes. You can't wait to see what everyone else has come up with. And you know, everyone in the pit lane is absolutely unapologetic plagiarist if they see things that are good, because there is only a prize for winning, and so if you see good things, then you'll follow them. And
are you indulging any plagiarism in the wind tunnel at the moment?
We definitely, you can see that we're not running the identical stuff to other people, and we haven't investigated all the paths that we've seen. So yeah, as every year, this is a interesting period in the tunnel where you quickly scan through things and try and figure out what you may have missed.
Can't keep you much longer. Thank you very much for coming on. I'll leave one final question, and I'm not expecting you to give me an honest answer to it. Are you holding something back? Have we seen everything from you yet? There's three lines of thinking in this paddock at the moment. One, you guys might have got it wrong. Two, you might not be totally sure of where you are. Three, you're supremely confident and not showing anybody what you've actually got. Or is it somewhere betwixt the three?
Well, at this time of year, nobody shows everything they got. They just don't, you know. There's been a whole host of soft tyre,
glory runs, shall we call them?
Qualifying simulation runs. There will be a spread of fuel loads in there. No one, I would guess, is down at qualifying loads, and we very much are not. But I would guess that the level of fuel we have, way off where we're going to be in qualifying, is probably similar in the other top teams. So all of us are holding back.
Nice.
Because we do. And I would guess that if you look at the leaderboard, you won't see the qualifying order on it at the moment. But if I had to take a guess, we're playing catch up to Ferrari, maybe our nose in front of Red Bull, and then behind that, the midfield, there's a little bit of a gap, but it's closed up compared with the year before.
Fantastic, great insight. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Great stuff, and best of luck. We'll see you in goodness, it's only a couple of days, isn't it? And then we're in Melbourne. Jim, thank you so much. We'll let you get on. You're busy,
Thanks a lot,
Thank
James.
you very much. Thank you. Wonderful insight from the world champions.
Absolutely.
There, on what's going on in testing for them.
It sounds like they've got some really tightly calibrated sandbags with three-pointed stars on in Brackley at the moment.
Excellent stuff. No, really appreciate him coming on, and all of our guests throughout this week taking the time to explain to us a little bit more about what's going on behind the scenes here in testing. Now, we've covered front wings, we've covered the barge board area, we covered wing mirrors yesterday in terms of those areas of big interest of change on the cars this year. I know, though, that there are some other areas that have interested you throughout testing that you've seen and that you wanted to discuss in this final show. So start us off, if you would. I think the first thing we're going to talk about is the Ferrari and the Alpha exhaust.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you remember back to 2014, I know it's sort of dusty history book time.
I was a whippersnapper then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When these cars were introduced, you had a big old exhaust, a single exhaust, and people complained about the sound of the cars. It was a bit too quiet. So, in an attempt to improve the volume, improve the sound, the FIA mandated that all teams include extra wastegate exhaust pipes. So these little extra tiny pipes above the main tailpipe. These comes directly from the wastegate, and in theory, and actually I believe in practice, made the cars a little bit louder and made the sound a little bit better. But they became very crucial aerodynamic components. Where the rear wing sits, how you mount them in the back of the car, it has a factor on everything.
Direction, talking about blown wings.
Exactly, and there's a little aerodynamic components, some of which have been banned, some of which are still with us. Now, there had been a consensus building over the last few seasons of running the main tailpipe and two little wastegate pipes alongside it. Pretty much everybody used that, up until this week, when Ferrari and Alfa Romeo, which is of course Ferrari engined, started playing with what I like to call a shotgun approach.
Okay.
And I'm not talking a sort of go out into the countryside and shoot some clays shotgun. I'm talking Wild West, one barrel above the other shotgun.
Oh, so not side by side.
Not side by side. So Ferrari have been playing with putting their wastegate exhaust, single wastegate exhaust, above the main tailpipe.
Interesting.
But they've also mounted two of them above the main tailpipe on the Alfa Romeo and the Ferrari, and they've been chopping and changing between the two as the tests have gone on.
Okay.
Ferrari clearly think, as do Alfa Romeo, that there's a gain to be had here. And I'm very, very curious to see how that's going to play out through the season, because this is something that was seriously heavily researched back in 2015, 2016, and this consensus came around. So what's changed? I'm not sure, but it's a really interesting area to watch.
Fascinating. For me, one of the things I've been really interested in, and it's a team that has had all of the negative headlines around them, but Williams' front suspension. Very different to what was launched on the renders of what the car would be when it finally arrived out here and got on track. We were talking about it earlier, and it's something which I understand may even be borderline, potentially not quite legal.
Well, we heard from Ross Brawn earlier this week that quite a lot of people have turned up at this test with solutions that nobody really thought were legal, but they've gone back and looked at the regulations and they probably are.
Yeah.
And I think the Williams front suspension is an extreme example of this. If you look on the outboard elements, it's really sort of, there's an extension of the upright. That's the big metal thing that holds the wheel and the brakes and the suspension all together on the outboard. And to the top of the wishbone, and it's very, very far inboard, and you've got this big, swooping, essentially aerodynamic component.
Well, this is it.
And I spoke to a couple of technical directors. They looked at it and went, "Oh, we didn't think that was allowed." And they've obviously gone away and realised it probably is, because no one's saying it's illegal. They're just saying, "Oh, well, that's quite marginal."
Is the fact, though, that Williams are struggling at the moment, does that hide its potential advantages, or will they be going back and looking at it and seeing if it would work for them on their concept?
I don't think Williams have got a handle on their car at all at the moment. That first 2 days of testing they missed, and then a very quickly built car, they don't know where they are.
Would their rivals be looking at it?
Oh, without a doubt.
Okay.
Without a doubt. But it's a very, very difficult thing to copy, because you need to create a new upright. That in itself is a huge job. Then you may need to change your suspension geometry. Again, a huge job, and that could mean you need a monocoque change. Basically impossible in season these days. But the front suspension in general is a really, really interesting area, because we were getting towards the lower wishbones. A lot of teams like Mercedes, like Toro Rosso, were blending them, creating a very low drag wishbone, which reminded me a lot of. Oh, there's Lewis. It reminded me a lot of.
No, you
lovely.
just walk straight through,
That's
mate.
fine. Alan does it as well. Reminded me a lot of the Tyrrells that used to race at Hockenheim. Very low drag upper wishbone, blended. It was just a big triangle rather than A shape. Mercedes and a few others were blending their lower wishbone a lot. That's largely gone away as a result of the new regulations. But the blending at the rear is coming back, and I think teams are still using the suspension components for aerodynamic gain. Something else, Racing Point helping now as well. Something else that teams are looking into, and I think they don't want to us to talk about wishbones at the moment.
Clearly, let's move on, because there were some other points of interest that you had going into the break now before Melbourne, focusing around McLaren. Should we talk about first?
Yeah. So looking at the rear suspension, there was a very big blending of the upper rear wishbone, but McLaren have very much integrated the rear suspension, a lot of Lewis fans, with the rear wing end plates, which on the McLaren are really extreme. So another area of these new rules is that the end plates on the rear wings were meant to be super simple.
Yeah.
And they ended up essentially being two cut end plates moulded in the middle with these little sort of tiny little links.
But the hanging elements weren't supposed to be there.
No, and they've got even more, so it's become an even more extreme area of development than in previous years.
And Mercedes, finally, obviously, is something that everybody's been pouring over this week, ostensibly a new car.
Yeah, I mean, we heard James just now talking about it. Every single aerodynamic component on the surface of the car had been changed. I wonder how many mechanical changes they made as well, because you don't get to see that until Melbourne, when they have to get rid of the screens and we can all have a look at it undressed, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you said, though. They're behind Ferrari. So I think it might be that maybe they are lost.
Well, Lewis admitted as much today. He said, we're probably a good half a second behind the Ferraris. Red Bull, talking to them as well, they don't think they're quite there with the Ferraris either, although talking to Jos Verstappen this morning, he said Max is supremely confident that with the Honda power unit in the back of that car, they've actually got the capability to compete, and actually when they turn it up, come qualifying, they may have the power that they never had with the Renault power unit to be able to fight for the front row of the grid.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't know, the development battle's going to be really tight. And if Red Bull are as close as James made out, Red Bull have a faster iteration process for aerodynamic components compared to every other team. They've got something very clever in their software that lets them get ahead quicker.
Interesting. Right, almost time to go. Before we do, I'm going to get you to pin your colours to the mast, so to speak. Let's do a rundown of where we think the competitive order is as we stand here now about to go to Australia. I think we can both agree Ferrari are up here.
Absolutely.
Who's next?
I think still Mercedes, because I can't bring myself to say they're not going to be mega strong.
I'm going to say Red Bull. I think Red Bull second, with Mercedes maybe on par, maybe slightly below.
Now, I'm disagreeing here with the technical director of the team I'm about to mention.
Okay.
But it's also Honda powered. I think Toro Rosso was stronger than anybody expects them to be, and Albon seems to be a real talent. I wonder if they could deliver something really surprising.
I think Alex is massively underrated. Do we put them fourth, or do we put Alpha fourth?
Oh, well, there's the other sneaker in the pack. The Alpha looks like a very clever design of car. It follows the concept introduced by Jörg Zander, the former Audi Sport engineer, who came to the team, came up with that really clever concept last year, which initially didn't work, and then started to work brilliantly with Leclerc at the wheel.
Yeah.
Now, I think they're moving up, so they could, again, I think there's a lot of this is going to come down to weather conditions and track type.
Okay. A congested midfield, we know that. Racing Point, McLaren, Haas, Renault, I still don't think we've seen everything from them, and people today saying they may have gained as much as 50 horsepower over the winter. Many question marks there. Williams, sadly, at the moment, I think, again, we all agree, at the bottom of the pile, but from that, it can only get better.
You mentioned Renault. Now, we can't ignore the power units. Now, we haven't spoken much about power units at all because there haven't been any rule changes. But I was talking to Remy Taffan, the power unit engineer from Renault, and he seems incredibly confident about the work they've done. You mentioned that 50 horsepower boost. It's not just about outright power, it's about torque, it's about packaging, and I think they've done something a little bit special. Those yellow cars, they've got big budgets, great facilities now. They've improved their facilities in the UK.
Two great drivers.
Later in the season, could they come on really strong? As teams like Racing Point, who are using that older style monocoque, and Haas, who have a very small number of engineers, start to fade in the development war.
Yes.
I think you could see Renault moving up.
Great stuff. Mate, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Your insight, your intellect, everything this week has been absolutely fantastic. I've enjoyed it tremendously. Let's do it again sometime, yes?
Let's absolutely do that.
Great, let's do that. Folks, thank you for following along. Thank you for all your messages. Hope this has been a good little insight into what goes on behind the scenes with testing from a technical perspective, leading into what I